Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about the instructions assignment. So in order to find all the information that you need, you'll be looking under the instructions assignment tab right here, which is now available to you. Here you will find the assignment 5 assignment sheet, the assignment example, the Safe Assign link for when you're going to be posting it, as well as a few other items in here that are helpful to completing this assignment. So first, let's go ahead and go over the actual assignment sheet. So before you listen to this video, I advise that you go ahead and take a few minutes to read through this assignment sheet. The first thing I'd like you to do is take note of the rough draft due date and the final draft due date. And although this assignment sheet doesn't reflect it, you will have 2 rough drafts for this assignment that are due. If you look at the class schedule, you'll be able to see the due date for the additional peer review that we're going to be doing for the second rough draft. Having 2 rough drafts for this assignment has been the most successful way of helping students in the past to be able to make the correct reviews and to go over problems with the assignment that they might be experiencing. So I've decided to include that with this class as well. So for this assignment, you're going to be taking the same tool that you've used for the previous 2 assignments, and you're going to write a set of instructions. This set of instructions doesn't have to include all new material. In fact, you're going to be able to use some of the material that you've previously written in the definition and description assignments and put these within this paper as well as part of the set of instructions. You don't have to cite yourself for this assignment, but as always, when you're in future classes, make sure that you check with your professor about citing yourself in other papers and about using material from your other papers as well. This isn't a typical thing that instructors like for you to do, but within technical communications, it's a great thing to be able to do in order to build on your writing and to build it up to a set of instructions. So it works for us. So you'll incorporate what you've previously written about the tool as needed, and you'll consult resource materials as needed as well. And if you need to use any outside sources, make sure that you document them, as always. And although I've been a bit lenient on using MLA 8.0 in the past, I'm going to be asking that you use MLA 8.0 for this paper. So I will be grading for the use of MLA in this paper. And it's simple enough to use MLA 8.0. You can go to EasyBib or Son of Citation and enter your source there, then list it on a works cited page. And that's all you have to do. In addition to listing any sources that you might go to or consult, make sure that you list out any sources that you get pictures from as well. So for this assignment, you're going to identify a task that you can perform with your tool and write instructions for it. Just as you did when picking out your tool, you want to keep in mind that you should keep the task simple and focused. And you want to break down activities into one task at a time. For instance, you might be thinking of building a bookcase as one task, whereas building a bookcase is actually a series of tasks put together. So if your tool was a hammer and you wanted to use that as a task, I would say, no, don't do that. Instead, let's talk about, for instance, just hammering a nail through a piece of wood, and that can be your task. So think of a very simple task to accomplish with your tool. Oddly enough, this is one of the more difficult aspects of this assignment, is just choosing a task. It's difficult to think about all the things we do in modern society and break it down activities into tasks sometimes. So as you're choosing something, if you have any questions about whether or not your task is acceptable, please feel free to send me an email. Which, by the way, that sound you just heard was a student sending me an email about something. So, choose a task. Make sure that it's something that you can complete with your tool and that you don't need other tools to do it. So note, when you consider what instructions to write, decide which set of instructions you believe is most appropriate or useful for the audience that you identify. And then we go down here to audience. So the audience identifies a technician or a 10-year-old child, and you can choose one of them, who needs to know how to use the tool in order to perform a particular task. For example, instructions for using a calculator in order to find a square root. That's a good example of how to use a tool to complete a task, and how to use an audience to do so, and how to not use an audience to do so, but how to focus your instructions for a specific audience in order to do so. Your instructions should also consider the title. The title of your instructions should uniquely identify which tool you're using and the task that you're performing with that tool. And it can very simply be, so for the sake of this example, instructions for using a calculator to find a square root. That can be the title. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be focused enough to let me know what the tool is and what task we're performing with that tool. And by the way, the person who actually did once use a calculator to find a square root ended up choosing a different task to perform because he found that that was a little bit too complex for him. And by the way, that's something that could come up as well. Don't be upset or disturbed or alarmed, etc. if you end up choosing a different task. Most of the time, students will choose a task and then choose another one that's related to it in order to find something that's more simple and easier to write about. And that usually happens after the first peer review. And again, if you need to get in touch with me, please feel free to send an email at any time and ask about whether or not you think it's acceptable to write about a specific task. Next up, you want to talk about the introduction. Or rather, I want to talk about the introduction. So for the introduction of this paper, you want to make sure that you describe the purpose of the instructions, what you're going to be doing, the skill required to perform the task, the materials and equipment needed, and you want to have a summary of the major steps. This summary of the major steps prepares the reader for the steps. So it's a flag to let the reader know that you're going to be getting a series of steps here that's going to help you complete this task. This is a very important part of the introduction. Make sure you have it. Make sure you also provide any additional information that the audience might need in terms of warnings, cautions, additional notes. For instance, if you have a tool that for some reason needs to be charged in advance, let them know about that. If there are any warnings about a device being dangerous, etc., make sure you caution them as well. And make sure you also, if it's a significant warning or caution and there's danger involved, you're going to want to call out attention to it as we have discussed in class. And think in terms of bright colors like red, symbols that'll catch attention, listing it ahead of other steps so that the audience can be properly notified. Individual steps and sub-steps. So logically, the sequence of major and minor steps under appropriate headings and subheadings are there so that the audience can better follow the instructions that you're asking them to follow. So for instance, you up here provide a summary of the major steps. Then you give them any warnings they need, or perhaps you even put the warnings up here before even the introduction. Then you're going to go on and provide those steps that they need to complete whatever tasks or whatever is necessary to complete the task that you're asking them to complete with your tool. And in order to do that, sometimes the steps include sub-steps. So rather than just having, for instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you might have 1A. So title, it uniquely identifies the tool. I might put 1A under here. And the A could say, be very specific with this, right? And that 1A would be a sub-step. So sub-steps are required to just give the reader just an additional piece of information that they may need to help them efficiently and effectively complete the task that you've asked them to complete or that they need to complete. These sub-steps and steps should include visual aids and safety information, including the warnings we mentioned before, placed appropriately. So if you have to jump up and put the warning at the beginning of the steps, that's fine. If you think it should be placed specifically with a certain sub-step, that's good too. Place it where it's most effective. And by effective, I mean place it where it's going to help whoever the audience person is not be harmed by your tool or the task that they're completing. The conclusion. Make sure you discuss at the very end of your set of instructions the work that's being performed by the tool. Summarize what you've asked them to do, and remember that this section shouldn't include any new information. This should just be a quick summary of what you've asked them to already do. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know. In addition to this assignment sheet, you'll also be able to access the example that I've provided. Hold on just a second. Here we go. Here's the example. So please be sure to go over and review the How to Use a Multimeter to Measure Voltage paper by Russell Crowe, which is obviously totally real, right? And notice that the title's specific, the audience is identified, we have an introduction, there's a caution listed. I apologize for this not capturing all of the the lettering out here, but you'll be able to see that in the example as you look at it. Notice there's a photograph of the tool, and there are arrows pointing to the specific pieces of the tool that I'm concerned with. The tool is cited right here. There's also a works cited that's correctly done in MLA. I believe it's correctly done in MLA for this example. If it's not, you still have to do it. Also, I talk about putting a caution here. Notice that student Russell Crowe example, wonderful student, wrote rotate the blah 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 voltage. Do not put blah 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 in your paper. This is just an example. But yeah, we make sure that the audience, by the way, can see what the pieces of the multimeter are as they're working through these steps or before they do their steps. Right there. That way, when we're asking them to complete steps, they already have seen what pieces are. And then when we go on to the second page, we show it again. Why do we show it again on the second page? Because in order to keep following the instructions, otherwise, we'd have to flip back and forth. So if you have a page 2 and you're still going through steps and sub-steps, make sure you show your tool again. And that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching this, and happy writing!